Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange Podcast. Stories by leaders for leaders to help you raise the bar on your own excellence, to release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's podcast. Hey, folks, it's the Nonprofit Exchange, and this is Hugh Ballou. I'm in Charleston, West Virginia today. Russell, you're still in Colorado, aren't you?
Still here, right here in the sunny Aurora, Colorado.
Yeah, we've had some cold weather, but it's 72 and sunny in Charleston today. This is the number one tourist destination in the country, they tell me. So I'm anxious to eat some of that southern seafood they have down here. So we have a distinguished guest today, and since I'm mobile, I'm going to let you take the lead today. So this is going to be a very interesting version of the Nonprofit Exchange. So Russell, why don't you let our guest introduce herself?
Yes, and today we have a very exciting guest, and she's the CEO of Embold Media and host of the Peace Unleashed podcast. Ellie, greetings. Thank you for joining us. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself today?
I will definitely do that. First of all, thank you guys so much for having me on. I know you've been traveling, so I really appreciate you hopping on with us. And Russell, you've been just nothing but sunshine. You're just so wonderful. I enjoyed every conversation we've had. So thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to contribute whatever I can. So I am a serial entrepreneur, and I started my first business when I was 19 years old. And I have a media company called Embold Media. And last year I started, this journey started maybe 3 years ago, where I recruited a couple of friends of mine and we started creating meditations because, with everything going on in the world, if you want peace outside in the world, you have to find peace within. That's the way to world peace, is through our individual hearts. So we started creating meditation courses. We started hosting meditation parties in LA. If you're interested, get on the email list. They're really a lot of fun. It's a dinner party with meditation thrown in the middle of it. And then last year, I started an Instagram account called Peace Unleashed. And it was simply for the purpose of inspiring people, reminding them that they are perfect and they're wonderful and they are, unconditional love, individualized in physical form. And I started sending daily reminders out. I call them love notes. And the account started obviously with no followers, and it's a bit over 3,000 followers right now. So the popularity of that and the questions I was receiving led me to start doing Instagram lives to answer questions about how do you attain internal peace, how do you, maneuver through all this contrast and this chaos, how do you tap into unconditional love when there's so much reason to block that love. And so I started answering the questions on Instagram Live, and then that evolved into a podcast called Unleash Your Peace, in which I simply talk about the different aspects of the internal world and how to do all of those things, how to find inner peace. And so because I have this corporate background and entrepreneurial background, I've been doing a lot of talks and doing webinars and bringing the spirituality into companies, going to schools and talking at schools. And I found that this is a really big passion of mine because I had a lot of chaos growing up. It took me a long time to find peace within myself, and just being able to share all of that, how I was able to do it and how I've been helping others do that for years. This has been pretty much a highlight of my life. I think this is what I'm here for, what I'm here on this planet for.
There seems to be a lot of conflict in society today. You turn on the TV,
Mhm.
you see people sort of at odds. You see people that have and people who do not have. And are we starting to see a movement toward finding something a little deeper? People are dissatisfied at their work. A lot of nonprofit leaders are really up against it. They're having some difficulty with funding.
Mhm.
Some changes to the tax law have potentially changed the giving environment, but you know, with nonprofit, and we call them for-purpose businesses,
Yeah.
there's a lot of burnout, and not only are people facing keeping their organizations going, they are dealing with real human problems that they see out there, and they've seen a lot of conflict. So is there a movement toward that in the business world and in other places toward really finding some sort of deeper meaning or some sort of way to take care of themselves, find more meaning in their work, and to get along with others?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, right now we're at a really exciting time, and it's easy to overlook that. I mean, when you look around, first of all, we live in a science fiction world. You know, I'm speaking to you through this tiny device, you know, that is essentially a computer. The three of us are in completely different areas. The people watching from all over the world. I mean, this is science fiction we live in, right? So if you go back 100 years even, it would be unfathomable what we're doing here right now. So it's very easy to kind of forget how exciting this time is. And the other thing that's really easy to forget is that, you know, the macro mimics the micro. And when we look at the micro, we know that any breakthrough we have on an individual level, anytime we have achieved anything on an individual level, anytime we have expanded on an individual level, it has come as a result of contrast, right? So I don't call it conflict, I call it contrast, because that's all it is. All of the things that make us feel, you know, chaotic and confused and upset and frustrated, all of those are questions, and all of them are challenges. Guess what? We cannot have answers without questions. We can't have solutions without problems, without challenges. So we should actually be thankful that we are facing all of these questions, that we're faced with problems that we can actually solve, because without those, there would be no expansion. I mean, can you imagine, Russell, living in a world where all of your needs are taken care of all the time? Everybody looks the same, acts the same, thinks the same. There's no need for language at that point, right? Because we're communicating just by being, just by knowledge. I mean, it's this euphoric, wonderful place, and I'm sure it's beautiful over there, but there's never any need to create anything. So, and I think if we shift our perspective and look at all of the contrasts we're experiencing as opportunity for expansion, opportunity for creation, something quite magical happens. Because then we're not looking at people who are creating conflict or contrast within our lives as, you know, this enemy who is like trying to ruin our lives. We actually see them as leaders, as spiritual leaders who are helping us expand, right? So some of the best science, I'm a sci-fi person, I love science fiction, and some of the best science fiction movies of all time are the ones before CGI, before there were all these amazing solutions for making things very, very realistic, right? Because the directors were faced with a problem. How do you communicate this, you know, fantastical concept in a compelling and real way, right? So when you have tough questions, you just come up with better answers. So my heart totally goes out for every business owner, every you know, nonprofit owner, because we're trying to make impact, and we're trying to make this world a better place. But if you switch your thinking around and say, okay, so these challenges are happening not to screw me, not to mess with me, but to make my solution that much better.
Ellie, you're just amazing. I wanted to welcome people on Facebook. I've been traveling and we were late getting on, but they've been listening to you on Facebook. So I wanted to rally back around and just give us a quick explanation of yourself, and then we'll let it go back to Russell because he's got a really good line of questioning. But we'll have some people come by and visit on Facebook. So just give them an update of who Ellie is. And how do you say your last name?
It's Shoja. Shoja, yeah. So I'm a writer, I'm a producer, I'm a serial entrepreneur, I'm a public speaker, a motivational speaker, an author. So, and I was just talking a moment ago about how I've been starting businesses since I was 19 years old. It's a disease at this point, just like all other serial entrepreneurs, I just can't sit still. And recently, in the last couple of years, I've been using, that background to create solutions for people to find inner peace. So what are all of those internal tools you need to live your best life yet? So I had a very unconventional, weird, traumatic upbringing. And it took me a while to find peace, to find groundedness, to find all of these, concepts that I share. And this way of looking at the world where nothing is ever going wrong, everything is always working out for me. And so now that I have found it, I feel very much compelled to share it with as many people as possible so that others can find peace,
Love it. Where are you talking from?
I'm talking from beautiful, sunny Southern California, Los Angeles, California.
Great. Russell, I'm going to throw it back to you. Thank you for your good questions.
Thank you. Yeah. And so meditation creates transformation in the lives of people. And I don't know that people always reach for meditation. They might think of it as a religious practice or not really think of it in terms of the practicality. So talk a little bit about why it's practical in any organization setting, whether that's a for-profit or nonprofit. How can these tools in a practical way help people take care of themselves and really sort of transform the dynamic within an organization?
Yeah. Excellent question, Russell. Such an important question as well. A lot of people have a misconception about what meditation is. You think about meditation and you think, some monk sitting on top of a mountaintop and, transcending this world. And that is one aspect of meditation. That's one way of practicing meditation. But meditation is not, as you said, a religious practice at all. It's not even that much of a spiritual practice, to be honest with you. I mean, there's a lot of spirituality that comes in through meditation, but it's not even that. So what is then meditation? And to understand really the impact of meditation, we have to understand one very important thing about the way we live. And that is that we have thoughts, right? So thoughts are things. Thoughts are, when you have a thought, anytime you want to create something, first you create it in your thought and then you create it in the real world, right? So, but the problem is, as useful and as wonderful as thoughts are, a lot of times for most people, for 99% of people, their thoughts are running their lives. Right? So most people are not in charge of their thoughts. So while our thoughts can really help us create the world that we want, most of the time, the way we use thoughts is in a very self-destructive way. We let our thoughts create a reality by default. What do I mean by that? thought pops in your head. You know, you start a project and the thought pops in your head, what if this doesn't work? Right? What if, who am I to talk about this? You know, like, I'm never going to be able to finish that. Now, it's just a thought. But the problem is, if I just entertain that thought, or if I think that thought is something real and has any kind of grounding in reality, guess what? I'm never going to finish any projects, right? I'm never going to do anything with my life that is worthwhile. So what meditation does is it allows us to step back and realize that, first of all, we are the thinker of that thought, right? So I become aware that I am thinking at all. And then meditation helps train our mind to release the thoughts that are not serving us, so that we can replace those thoughts with ones that do serve us.
Well, yeah, and
So
we talk a little bit about both the conscious and the unconscious mind, and a lot of the chatter that goes on.
yes,
The subconscious mind really drives the bus in a lot of ways, because we don't have to think about taking time to breathe. We don't have to think about a lot. There are a lot of things that just are handed over to our subconscious, all of our body functions and so on. But underneath, the subconscious has a lot of power, a lot of creative power, and it's working there. And with meditation, you know, my misconception of meditation began early with this notion that at some point, something shifts, or it changes you some type of way. And what I'm finding now in putting it into practice is that it's there to help you understand your mind and put your mind into practice. And so I think with a lot of people, especially now with all of this stimulation coming in, we're a short attention span society with 24/7 news and everything else going on. And I think that has an impact on how calm each of us are as individuals. And so meditation can help quiet the mind. But why is it important for people to take time to quiet their minds, especially with silence? Because we're so used to being overstimulated that silence is something that's kind of overlooked.
Yeah, it was excellent question. Okay, so where does inspiration come from? Right? So the human being is essentially two parts. You have the physical human, who is, you know, like your body. It's all the quantitative aspects of who you are, right? So your identity that you've created, your physical experience here in this physical world, right? So all of that is the human side of you. But then there's a much bigger part of you where essentially inspiration comes from, where, you know, your joy comes from, all of the qualitative things that you can't fully explain unless you feel them, right? And that is your beingness. That's the non-physical part of you. And the human being, when we operate at our highest potential, it's when we close the gap between the two selves, between the physical self and the non-physical self. And what meditation does is it allows you to do that, because your brain, your mind speaks the language of the human, right? So it quantifies everything. It explains everything. It creates, you know, theories and numbers and descriptions and whatever in order to explain and teach. However, those things that you can't explain, that you can't teach, things like inspiration, where ideas come from, the feeling of joy and connectedness, right? Clarity. How do you explain clarity, right? You know when you're experiencing it, but can you teach someone to have clarity? You can't, because it's qualitative, right? So where does that come from? That comes through your heart. So your inner being communicates to you through information that is not given to you by your brain. It's given to you through your heart. So what then happens is you receive that information and you translate it with your mind into ideas that make sense to you in your world. So why is meditation important then? Because it quiets that mind. So you drop out of the thinking brain. And when you drop out of the thinking brain, you open up space. And in that space, you open yourself up. It's like the door opens up for inspiration to enter you. This is why, we have our best ideas, or we have aha moments when we're in the shower, when we're on the toilet, or, like when you're just waking up in the middle of the night, when your mind is quiet. That's when you have those aha moments, and you just know the solution to something that, you've been grappling with for a long time, right? So we can create that openness, that quietness, that space of just inspiration by learning how to quiet the mind actively. So a lot of people think that you just sit there and you close your eyes. What a waste of time. But meditation is not passive at all. I mean, you sit there, you close your eyes. By the way, you can meditate with your eyes open, but you limit the stimuli going in when you close your eyes, right? So we want to limit stimuli as much as possible. So you close your eyes, you focus, you bring your focus onto one thing. And so that is of your choosing. I call that the home base. Your home base can be your breath going in and out of your nose. That's one of my favorites because I take my breath with me everywhere I go. But your home base doesn't have to be the breath. It can be, the trickle of a waterfall. It can be the hum of an air conditioner. It can be music. You can put on, some meditative music and focus on that. The whole idea is you choose a home base and you bring your attention to that home base. Now that you've chosen your home base, when a thought comes, you catch yourself, oh my gosh, I'm now thinking about what happened in third grade when so-and-so said whatever, and you become aware that you just thought that thought. What do? You consciously and actively release that thought, and you bring your attention back to home base. Now, does it matter if you're meditating 2 minutes or 20 minutes or 2 hours? No, it doesn't. The only difference it makes is that you have more opportunities to practice bringing your attention back to your home base if you're meditating longer. That's like doing 2 push-ups versus 20 push-ups. You're just going to get stronger faster if you do 20 push-ups, but 2 push-ups is still going to help your body become stronger, right? So that's all it is. We just quiet the mind. We become aware that we're thinking. We release the thought. And why is that important? Because it connects us to our heart space. It connects us to that place where inspiration comes from. And guess what? When you meditate, when you do this, when you really get good at that, then when you're in a stressful situation, you're in a meeting and you don't know what to do, you don't have to step out of the meeting. You can simply bring your attention to that home base, take a couple of deep breaths while you're in that meeting, and drop out of that racing monkey brain, and the solution, the answers come to you a lot faster. This is why people who meditate are more efficient, they're more productive, they have better solutions, they see the bigger picture a lot more clearly, they have more clarity, they feel more grounded, their relationships are better because they can communicate more clearly. I mean, there's so many incredible side effects to meditating that, we don't even realize.
So Ellie,
Yes, sir.
what you don't realize yet, we've just become acquainted here, is that part of the philosophy that Russell and I help people master is working on self as
yes.
And so just studying some of the great religions, there's a discipline of monks meditating, a Buddhist or Christian or whatever, that there's a deep meditation that's part of their self-knowledge. But it's also part of our leadership discipline. It's part of equipping ourselves. So I'm interested, as you tell the story, you've obviously gotten to a place that you've mastered it at a certain level. And I'm sure there's another level that you want to go through. But for those of us who've not even gotten that far, give us a little encouragement. This wasn't an instant thing for you. I imagine there was a time when you really struggled to find what you're talking about,
Yes.
to be centered, to be comfortable in meditation. And the monkey brain, boy, is that descriptive. How did you deal with that and overcome that? Because one of the things that Russell and I encounter with entrepreneurs is they're always busy with activity.
Yeah.
And it's so unproductive. There's so many activities, they sort of cancel each other out.
Yeah.
And so as you're talking about it, there's a passion, but share your journey of how did you start? And I'm sure it wasn't an instant success. How did you then overcome that to get to the next place? Give us some encouragement.
Oh, Hugh, that's such a huge question. So I'll see where the answers want to come from. But I had an extremely, I've alluded to it. I've had a really unconventional, traumatic childhood. And, the reason I'm so okay with all this chaos happening around us is because I know the contrast is going to allow us to grow and expand as individuals and also as a society, as a global consciousness, really. And I know that because this is true on the micro level in my life. So by the time I was 12, I wanted to kill myself. I had such a traumatic experience that I decided there is no God because a God that allows children to suffer as I had cannot exist. So I had severe nervous tics. I had severe anger issues. I wanted to just be done with this life. And for a long time, I lived in that place of just complete turmoil and chaos. And then in my mid-20s, my ex-boyfriend, who then became my ex-husband, he gave me a book. He gave me The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And this book was my introduction into the self. So I read this book, I wept through the pages of this book. It allowed me to kind of connect with myself on a much deeper level. And it was the first step into this avenue, this new path of spirituality. And it took me another 10 years to really start implementing and learning and finding peace within myself to the point that I felt like I'm completely peaceful individual. But then I went through a divorce and I destroyed my marriage really royally to the point that I just couldn't understand. And it made me realize there are still things underneath that I hadn't been addressing. And that led me into what you were talking about, Russell, which is the subconscious mind. So we internalize things that really don't serve us, beliefs and wounds that really don't serve us. And, when you think about, okay, so something's in your subconscious mind and I don't have control over it. So then how do you change something you don't have control over? And something that I have actually learned is that everything that is in your subconscious mind, you put it there consciously. It's not like it just happened accidentally, because all beliefs and all wounds, they're simply thoughts that you have thought a lot. So when you think a thought over and over and over and over, then what happens is your brain is going to say, well, this thought is very important to you. It must be true. So therefore, let me package it up and shove it underneath, somewhere in the back where you don't have to worry about it. It's just going to be programming that's going to run all the time. So you don't have to keep calling on that. And so it turns into a subconscious belief. So I had certain subconscious beliefs that were getting in the way of me having, the kinds of relationships I wanted. But how do you change that? Because at some point, those subconscious beliefs were conscious thoughts. You change it by having conscious thoughts that are different. You have to change it on a conscious level. So then that started the second leg of my internal exploration. So that has been kind of like my journey. It's going inward, identifying, these wounds, these beliefs. And then when I identify them, okay, so that's discrediting them, first of all, so that's not true. So then what do I want to rather believe? So then replacing them very consciously to until you get there. Now, Hugh, you mentioned something that is really quite, something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, which is that you have to work really hard. You have to be really busy. And there is a subconscious belief there that says, hey, if you're not hustling, you're not going to get anywhere. If you're not working really hard all the time, 16, 18 hours a day, then you're not going to make your dreams come true. But you can discredit that just by looking at people who work super hard and they don't have anything. I mean, how many entrepreneurs do you know who work, their bums off and they still have, they're still struggling? And then on the other side, how many entrepreneurs do you know who have achieved incredible success and they don't work nearly as hard as you think they should be working, right? So they work just a few hours a day. They go on vacation all the time and everything just seems to happen. So what is the difference between them? The difference is that subconscious belief. So if you have that kind of a subconscious belief that says, hey, I have to hustle all the time. I have to work in order to get to what I want, and it's not working, discrediting that belief is step one. And then what would you rather believe? Success comes to me with ease, right? So that's a much more productive belief. All the cooperative components always line up at the exact right time that I need them. That's a much better belief than I have to work really hard and fight for every tiny piece that I receive.
Russell, comes to my mind when she's talking about this, down the road from me in Wise, Virginia, there's the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And Napoleon Hill uses different terms and different parameters for describing a lot of the stuff you're describing. But basically, we're feeding our subconscious with our conscious thoughts, and the subconscious has to take it. And so there's this whole thing about spirituality, and how does that relate to us being in business or running a generic nonprofit? So Russell, he's got some really good questions formulated, I'm sure. So I'm gonna throw it back to Russ.
Oh, yeah. Well, what we're talking about is really taking care of our minds. And so here's the two things that I find with meditation. The first is that a lot of people have, and I came to this belief erroneously, a lot of people think that it's this very difficult thing that takes many years of practice to master, and that it's because it's this difficult. The second thing is that it's extremely time consuming. So they won't necessarily take time to look at that. So talk a little bit about why it's not quite as difficult as it might seem, and why putting it to use, even for very brief periods of time, can be useful. What makes it practical? Why would a nonprofit leader or anyone take a few minutes to try to master this?
Yeah. Oh, great question. By the way, Hugh, I love Napoleon Hill. That guy has been such an inspiration for me over the years.
There's a lot to learn, and I find that going back and reading even his basic the laws of attraction, or the first book he wrote, the Think and Grow Rich, you go back and read it again, and you underline it or highlight it with different colors, you see different things different times. But getting that clarity of thinking is number one. You read chapter 2 every day, having a definite purpose, and then people around you, and then having a mastermind group, but also having that clarity of thought that you're centered every day. Is what he learned from the 500 leaders he interviewed in his lifetime. So I've seen his typewriter, I've seen where he lived, I've seen his desk, and it's really incredible to think about all the people he touched. And I learned recently, I'm a Paul Harris Fellow in Rotary. He worked with Paul Harris.
Oh,
And,
that's awesome.
and that's just amazing. So, Russ, I'm gonna let you answer Russ's question, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I read Napoleon's Laws of Success in 16 Lessons, which Think and Grow Rich is an abridged version of that, essentially. But what an incredibly interesting and fun man. So to answer your question, Russell, it's not time consuming, and yes, those kind of objections do exist, and those are the most popular questions I get. I'm not doing it right, I don't have the time for that, and then they go on Facebook for 20 minutes, and I did a talk at Cognizant about mindfulness, and I was telling, after we talked about all the benefits of meditations and all the stuff it does, I was talking about, okay, so here are some ways you can incorporate it into your day, every day. And my kind of fun way of showing how easy it is, I said, well, you can have the midday quickie, and you can literally set your timer for 60 seconds and focus on your breath for 60 seconds. Anybody can do that. And, these are all consultants and they're very busy. And I said, and you can take your midday quickie on the toilet if you want to, right? So it's really, and all of that to say that it doesn't have to be this big production, like you don't have to like set time aside and play music and light some candles and, turn it into some big production. If you wanted to do a push-up, you would just drop into a push-up right now, right? If you wanted to, during commercial break, you would do 10 squats. And it doesn't have to be a production. You don't have to go to the gym and, put on your, workout gear and this and the other. You can just get up and do something. So the same with meditation. You literally, if you're feeling confused, if you're feeling overwhelmed, especially if you feel like you don't have the time to do anything, a lot of times what happens is, just physiologically, what's happening is you're entering a fight or flight state. So your breathing is really shallow. The blood is not circulating in your body. So if you just simply take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and just take really deep breaths during that time, and count your breath, 5 breaths in, 8 breaths out, 5 breaths in, 8 breaths out, just count that for 60 seconds. I guarantee you're going to come out of that minute with a lot more clarity. And I do want to just make a point about this breath where the exhale is longer than the inhale. And the reason you do that is because your body, when it's naturally in a place of just complete relaxation and calm and clarity, your exhales are naturally longer than your inhales. So then if you consciously extend your exhales, and you consciously extend the inhales and then make the exhales just even slower than the inhales, then you send your body this message that I am relaxed, I have clarity, I am calm, and you drop out of that monkey brain. So it makes it a lot easier to get out of that anxiety. Now, another thing.
I love that monkey brain thing. It's just like, and I will share with you to your point about not having to light candles. Running is a meditative exercise for me.
Yes. Without
the stimulus, your phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just being in God's nature and
absolutely
letting whatever happen and not programming my mind to be doing something specific. So I have a limited amount of success with that, but your encouragement here has got me wanting to go back and do some more of that.
Yeah, and you bring such an important point up, Hugh, is that you can be doing anything that you're doing if you bring your attention into the present moment. Something we haven't talked about is how meditation shrinks time. It literally shrinks time. So if you're not thinking about what happened 10 years ago or what's going to happen next week in that meeting, you're shrinking time. And what's the benefit of shrinking time is that when there is less time, vibration rises. And this is physics. This is quantum physics telling you this. I'm not telling you this. So we're finding evidence of why meditation makes you feel better in physics itself, in quantum physics itself. So whenever we shrink time, your vibration naturally rises. And as you know, all of your emotions have some kind of an emotional vibrational signature. They vibrate at different frequencies. So when you are in a place of shame and guilt, for example, you're vibrating at like 20 or 30 hertz. That's very low vibration. If you're in a place of clarity and love and compassion, those are very high vibration emotions. You're vibrating at over 500 hertz. That's, you're becoming literally less physical as you feel better, right? So it is physiologically to our advantage to feel better, to feel hopeful rather than anxious. So one way we do that is we literally shrink time. And anytime you shrink time, vibration rises. That's why people who meditate, for example, age slower. They just age slower, you know? So at the top of a mountain, there is more time than there is at the base of a mountain. So people at the base of a mountain age slower. You age faster when you're at the top of a mountain. So that all goes into just, I love science fiction and just quantum physics because it's so sci-fi-ish, but really fascinating stuff. So we can do that by shrinking time. And how do we do that? You just become super present in whatever it is you're doing. If you're cooking, you know, pay attention to how that, you know, the onions are sizzling in the oil, what it smells like, you know, how it's like the drops of water that are, you know, fogging up the lid, or, you know, like whatever sensation, whatever is present in that moment, if you just pay really close attention to it and bring your attention right into this present moment where the past no longer exists and the future doesn't exist, you are in a meditative state and you're going to raise your vibration. You're going to feel better. You're going to have more clarity. It's just physics says it's going to be so. So it is so.
You know, one of the things that I belong to a Science of Mind Center for Spiritual Living.
Oh, nice.
Part of our philosophy is, or the lion's share of our philosophy is about making your mind your friend and
Yes.
having that connection to the outside. But it's a very personal journey, and meditation's a really personal journey. And so tell me a little bit, and you probably run across it because you talk to organizations who talk to you and say, hey, the atmosphere here is just, we're stressed out and we need to do something. And the leader gets this, but maybe some of the people on the team don't know what to make of this when the leader comes in and says, okay, I've got Ellie Shoja here and she's talking about meditation. So why is it important for the company or organization to encourage that meditation, encourage the employees to get with this and help them sort of distinguish what it is? Because actually it's a practice. It's not a religious thing or a spiritual thing. That's actually a practice. So how do you make this, when you walk in an organization, how do you sort of make that sale, as it were?
Yeah. So first of all, if the leader gets it, that's a huge thing. I mean, there's a reason, you know, Apple and Google and Cognizant have meditation and mindfulness practices kind of built into their company. It's because their leadership gets it, right? And this meditation, mindfulness, it's very experiential. And all you have to do is experience that level of clarity and, you know, have it subdue your stress and your anxiety and give you the solution a lot more easily, just one time, for you to be able to understand the real benefits of it, right? But if the leadership gets it, you're 90% there, because the leadership is going to find a way to implement it. But then my job becomes making, helping the team understand the real benefits of it. And for me, it's very important to kind of like talk about meditation in a more scientific way, just to show why it works. It doesn't work because, it's not like this ethereal, a magical thing that happens. No, on a physiological level, it actually does things to your body, to your mind, to your brain, to your heart, that help you find clarity. I mean, science experiments now show that when you're meditating, your heart goes into a more steady heartbeat, right? So when you are meditating, your brain goes into a state where all of the parts of your brain communicate with each other a lot more cohesively. You go into brain cohesion. That's why you're able to make those connections a lot more easily. So science is telling us that. So then my job becomes making it so easy, so fast, like that, such a small kind of entry point for people that they get to start experiencing it just with 30, 60 seconds of commitment at a time. And then when they do that, all it takes is for them to like connect with that knowingness for a split second, and then they're sold. Then they're just going to make it part of their lives.
Yes, we're coming down very rapidly. This has just really been engaging. We're coming down very rapidly to our close, and we typically will talk about our sponsors here. And I don't know which of our sponsors.
I'm ready for that, Russell. And before I start with that, you've put up some links in the chat here for her website, Peace Unleashed, and then her podcast on iTunes, and her blog, and her Instagram. I have put those on the website. So if people go to thenonprofitexchange.org and click on your lovely picture, it'll take them to the page. And then they can click on these links. We'll have this recording posted by morning tomorrow. And people are listening to this podcast, we don't know when, what year, but there's some ways to find out about your podcast. And I will say that your wisdom vastly exceeds your linear years. This is really, this is very deep stuff. What I'll do is give a sponsor message, Ellie, then give it to you to do a final thought for people, just a short tip or a final thought to leave people with. And then Russ will close us out in this really wonderful podcast. Thank you for being here today. Our sponsor for this one is the United Methodist Cyber Campus. It's the Board of Higher Education and Ministry of the United Methodist Church. It's an online learning portal for ministry professionals, but really, good leadership is good leadership. And you'll see some major institutions there. You'll see Center Vision's logo. You'll see Center Vision's programs in there. But there's a portal for continuing education. And like Jim Rohn has said so many times, work on yourself more than you work on your enterprise. Work on yourself more than you work on your business. And that would apply to church or nonprofit leaders especially. So it's UMC for United Methodist Church Cyber Campus. And it's a very sophisticated portal, and there are lots of really mainline institutions that offer learning opportunities and very high level curriculum. But there's a wide variety, like the program that Center Vision has on there is a fundamental leadership program that anybody running a small charity, running a small or medium or large church or synagogue could benefit from. So umccybercampus.com. They have been an ongoing sponsor of the magazine and the podcast and Center Vision in general. So Ellie, what thought would you like to leave people with today?
I want to piggyback on that quote that you shared about working on yourself more than working on your business. And I can tell you that I've had 5 different businesses, and I've learned a lot through failure. being an entrepreneur. And I can tell you that if we spend just a fraction of the time that we spend on trying to get, let's say, new business, on our mindset, on our internal environment, we would get so much more business. We would get so much farther ahead. And I see that the biggest mistake entrepreneurs, leaders, and I'm sure it's true with nonprofit leaders, make is that they spend all of their time outside trying to be physical matter, bringing in physical, experiences rather than transcending it, becoming non-physical. It's like the difference is like being inside the maze and going right and left, trying to stumble your way to the solution, to rising above the maze and flying just over it. So when we work on ourselves, every time we work on ourselves, on that internal environment, we rise up. It's like we're in a hot air balloon. We go higher and higher. Pretty soon you're going to be above the maze and you're just going to coast right over it.
Yes, thank you very much, Ellie. It's been very enlightening, and that's another great term, enlightenment. I'd like to thank you for taking time to join us this week, and to thank all of you nonprofit difference makers out there who are serving others. In 2019 is going to be a very good year for all of us here. The important thing is to take care of yourself, and meditation is a tool that can be simple. So subscribe to Ellie's podcast and get some practical tools to help you and your team go out there and continue to make impact. The better you are, the more people benefit, because there are a lot of people who are relying on your work out there. And we're just blessed and grateful and ready to move society forward as nonprofit leaders. With that, the Nonprofit Exchange is here every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We've got a great slate of guests and webinars coming up this year. So we'll be looking forward to seeing you again right here next week. This podcast is available on both iTunes and Stitcher. Thank you very much, and we shall see you next week.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Thank you so much.